we're going to teach you tonight on how to do the perfect cauliflower rice, and it's very healthy for you, healthier for you than regular rice. And there's two really big pointers with pulling that off successfully, and we're going to cover that tonight to make sure that you are on top of it. Let's move on to prepping our head of cauliflower. You can do one of two ways. You can, in the recipe states, you can use your standard cheese grater. So I have like a box grater here. I'm going to use the standard cheese hole, and that's what I prefer. Or it says in the recipe, you can pulse it in a food processor, you know, with your blade and the food processor. Obviously, the food processor is going to be faster, but I don't think you're going to have consistent pieces that way, because if you pulse too much, they're going to be too fine. So I don't really recommend a food processor. The only time I would recommend a food processor, if you have this grater attachment that you can put in your food processor, and then you're feeding the florets in through there, and this can be perfectly grated and really fast rather than doing it all by hand. But that's up to you. I'm going to do it by hand today just to show you, and I'll show you how to completely break down this cauliflower. The first thing you want to do is just start breaking off the leaves that you can, okay? Don't worry about the core, we'll tackle that. But these leaves that are coming up the cauliflower, just break them off and just go around the whole cauliflower and take off what you can off the sides. And I'll show you how we're going to tackle that core. So what you're left with is your big cauliflower, and you just have this core part. This is where you have to be a bit careful because it's kind of round, it could wobble on you. So what I do, I just take my tip of my knife and just on the one area, just sort of cut it a little bit. I'm not trying to cut the whole thing out. I'm just going to cut it a little bit, move it a little bit, get in there with the core, with the knife, cut a little bit there, move it a little bit more, cut a little bit more there. So I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm not trying to, at this awkward angle, trying to put so much pressure to cut through the core all the way. I'm not doing that. I'm just turning it, doing a little cut at a time, all the way around till I get back to the beginning here. Now I can easily just take it, twist it, and it comes off so easily without any force whatsoever. The only thing I want you to do now, if you were to look at this base, some people will take a knife now and they'll cut out all that. I don't want you to do that. Extra work, and we actually need that to be intact. So I'm going to show you that next. But what I do is I just take out the remaining bits that are sort of going over into the florets by keeping the core intact though. And then what I do is I start breaking off the florets like so, and you'll see it has a chunk of core on there, and that's really important. We want that. So I just go around the cauliflower and just start breaking them off. And what you're going to be left with at the end, this last bit, just keep that intact like that. You want that. This is actually going to be a handle. That's why I wanted the core intact, and we weren't cutting out that last part once we had the main core off, because you're going to have a nice little handle to grab onto when you're grating everything. Because we only want to grate the florets. We don't want to grate the core, just the florets themselves. And we're just going to use that cheese grater, grabbing the handle, the core as our handle, that nub, and just start grating the florets. And you're going to find it creates these nice little rice granules by doing that. And when you start frying in the pan, you're really hard pressed to actually know if it's rice or if it's cauliflower, because it doesn't have a strong flavor, and you're going to be cooking it all these aromatics. And this is how you would actually make like a cauliflower fried rice too, and just grating until the florets are gone. And what you have on the cutting board, these nice little rice granules, it almost looks like. It'll look even more like rice once it's cooked. You get the odd little bit like that. I mean, you could take it and just grate it, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. This is why I like doing it by hand on a cheese grater rather than pulsing it with a food processor blade. So we're just going to go through, grate this whole thing. This is your other big tip for pulling off cauliflower rice. You need a large pan. So for the 6 cups of granules, I'm using a 12-inch pan. Be stainless steel, can be non-stick, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to put that on medium heat. We're starting with medium heat, folks. Okay, we'll let that pan heat up. Here's the big thing with cauliflower rice to pull this off. So number one, you got to have good granules. And the other thing I just mentioned right now is you got to have a big pan, because there's a lot of moisture in cauliflower. And I give you little pointers of this in the recipe too. You want a large pan. And once we get to the cauliflower, so just to recap, once this is on medium heat, which it is, once the pan is hot, we're going to add the oil, and then we're just going to cook these aromatics. So the ginger and the garlic and the onion with these spices in there for 2 or 3 minutes, just so the onion gets soft. At that point, we're going to stir in the peas for a minute, and then we'll be doing the cauliflower rice. And at that point, what we're going to be doing is we're going to changing the heat from medium to medium high. and cooking that cauliflower medium high. Here's the thing, we need the big enough pan area, surface area, to evaporate the moisture and that extreme heat, the medium high. If you continue just to cook it on medium, or you have a small pan, you're not going to have enough surface area in the pan to evaporate the moisture, that ton of moisture that's going to want to come out of that cauliflower. And what's going to happen is it's going to be bubbling up in the pan. It's going to be mushy. It's going to be terrible. We're looking for like a fried rice sort of texture to it. And because of the extreme moisture, you need a big pan and higher heat to evaporate that moisture out. So we're going to add our 2 tablespoons of oil. To that pan, we're going to add our bowl of aromatics. So that's the onion, garlic, ginger, curry powder, turmeric, salt, and pepper. We're going to cook that for about 2 or 3 minutes until it becomes fragrant and the onions become soft. We're going to add the peas. Look at how it's changed the color. And now, before adding the cauliflower rice, we're going to increase to medium high and then add the cauliflower rice, so we can successfully cook off all the moisture that's going to come out of this rice. And it says there to stir this constantly, medium-high heat, for about 3 to 4 minutes. You want to keep it moving at all times. The last thing you want to do is just stop and let that just sit in the pan, and it's going to start gathering moisture in there. By stirring it, you're going to redistribute it, help keep the heat nice and even all the way throughout your cauliflower, and it's going to help to release that moisture. At first, nothing's really going to happen, and then about a minute into it, you're going to start seeing a lot of steam coming off because the heat is finally penetrating that cauliflower and it's releasing the moisture, and you're going to start seeing some steam come off there. And again, we're medium-high heat, large pan. It's crucial that you do that so we don't get soggy, mushy cauliflower rice. We need to have that cooked texture of like a fried rice in this dish. And I'm just seeing now, I don't know if you can see that, but as I was stirring there, you can see the steam just starting to come off now. So it's starting to release the moisture and it is evaporating. If you're stirring this and you're starting to see moisture gather in the pan and it's bubbling in its own juices, that's telling you something. It's telling you you need a bigger pan, or it's telling you, hey, bump up the heat. It's not hot enough, because that should not be happening. And that's another good pointer as well. If you're actually using traditional rice to do like a fried rice, traditional rice just soaks up the oil like crazy. You have to keep adding more oil and more oil to get it fried, right? This is completely opposite, a lot more healthy for you because it's a vegetable, number one. But number two, we don't have to add the excess oil because there's just so much moisture in cauliflower rice compared to regular rice. And you'll get to a point within that 3 to 4 minutes that the steam is going to stop, and you're going to start to see the cauliflower start sticking to the pan a little bit, because you can tell that, hey, the moisture is cooked from it, and that's your indication that it's done. After you're done, bang off the heat. Just grab a little bite. Wow. Every single time I make this dish, I fall in love with it again and again. It's so good.